The theory of evolution is one of the most important theories in all of science. It is the unifying theory of all modern biology, and it is also crucial to understanding possibilities for life beyond Earth. In this video, we'll briefly discuss the evidence that makes scientists so confident in this theory. The evidence begins with the remarkable diversity of life on Earth. Millions of species of plants and animals have been identified on Earth's surface, and as this colony of tube worms near a deep-sea volcanic vent shows, the diversity extends to less familiar environments. Moreover, the species alive today represent only a small fraction of those that have ever lived. Here, we see fossils of dinosaurs, which were the dominant animal species for more than 100 million years until their extinction, probably as a result of an asteroid impact some 65 million years ago. Life itself goes back much farther, with fossil evidence indicating that life was abundant on Earth by at least 3.5 billion years ago, and likely for hundreds of millions of years before that. Indeed, the fossil record leaves no doubt that species change with time, which is what the word evolution means. In other words, evolution is a fact in the sense that the fossil record leaves no doubt that evolution has occurred. The theory of evolution explains how and why evolution occurs. Like all scientific theories, the theory of evolution is built around a simple model. This model, first proposed by Charles Darwin, is based on two indisputable facts. First, any localized population always has the potential to produce more offspring than the local environment can support, which means there is competition among individuals for survival. Second, individuals of a species will always vary in their hereditary traits. These two facts lead to an inescapable conclusion. Some individuals will be better able to survive and reproduce than others, which means these individuals will pass on their advantageous traits to future generations. In essence, nature automatically selects for traits that tend to enhance survival and reproduction, which is why we call this process natural selection. This model of evolution by natural selection successfully explains both the changes we observe in the fossil record and observed characteristics of living species. For example, Darwin famously used this model to explain the characteristics of finches he studied in the Galapagos Islands. Today, we have far more evidence for this model, including the fact that we have observed natural selection occurring before our eyes, both in the natural environment and in the laboratory. Moreover, we now know the molecular basis for natural selection, the molecule called DNA, which can copy itself and thereby pass genetic information from one generation to the next, while occasional errors in the copying process, or mutations, explain how new traits can be introduced. In that sense, the discovery of DNA was a great predictive success for the theory of evolution, since Darwin's theory demanded the existence of a mechanism for passing on heredity, even though Darwin did not know what that mechanism might be at the time. Before we continue, check your understanding by answering this question. Which of the following best describes what we mean when we say that evolution is a scientific theory? Is it A, we assume that evolution is true because we have no other way to explain life on Earth? B, it's our best guess as to how life on Earth began? C, the model of evolution through natural selection is supported by a strong and varied body of evidence? Or D, people are descended from chimpanzees? The answer is C. As we discussed in earlier chapters, in science, the word theory refers to a detailed model that has been rigorously tested in varied ways and that has passed all tests to date. The theory of evolution clearly meets these criteria. Incidentally, the other choices each represent common misconceptions. In particular, a scientific theory is not in any way a guess, and the theory of evolution does not say that humans descended from chimpanzees or any other living apes. Instead, it says that we and other living apes all evolved from a common ancestor. Returning to our earlier slide, it's worth noting that careful study of DNA also allows biologists to determine how closely different species are related. Two species with very similar DNA sequences must have evolved from a common ancestor relatively recently, while species that had a common ancestor farther in the past will by now have greater differences in their DNA. These types of DNA comparisons have thereby allowed scientists to map relationships among living species, a few of which are illustrated by this tree of life, which is discussed further in the chapter opening video and your textbook. These relationships have led scientists to conclude that all known life on Earth today shared a common ancestor in the distant past. Note, however, that while this evidence can help scientists predict the characteristics of the common ancestor, it does not by itself tell us how the common ancestor itself arose. For that, we must go beyond the biological theory of evolution and explore potential pathways of chemical evolution that may have led to life. You will read about this further in your textbook, but as this illustration shows, scientists now suspect that the origin of life occurred relatively easily and rapidly on Earth. Once started, the theory of evolution tells us that diversification was inevitable. These facts help explain why scientists suspect that the same processes may have occurred on many other worlds, leading to great interest in the search for life beyond Earth.